The old high school had been locked for decades, its windows clouded with dust, its hallways swallowed by shadows. Most people in town passed it without a glance, the way you ignore a place that feels wrong. But on a damp afternoon, while the rain smeared the view through his car windshield, Daniel Harlow decided to stop. He told himself it was curiosity. Maybe nostalgia, maybe something else entirely. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of paper and time. His footsteps echoed across the cracked linoleum, every creak of the building answering him like a whisper. Doors hung open, revealing abandoned classrooms littered with rusted desks and toppled chairs, but at the end of the corridor one door was closed. The science lab, the key was still in the lock. Daniel hesitated, his hand hovering, pulse quickening. No one had been in here for years, at least, that's what everyone believed. He turned the key, pushed the door, and was met with the cold stare of glass jars lined neatly on the shelves, inside them, shapes, creatures. Perfectly preserved, as if the decades hadn't touched them at all. The light from the hallway spilled into the lab, catching on the cloudy glass and the faint ripple of liquid inside each jar. Daniel stepped closer, his shoes sticking slightly to the floor as if it resented being disturbed. The labels were yellowed, the handwriting faded but still legible, Latin names he half recognized from biology class years ago. A frog floated in one jar, its limbs stretched unnaturally, skin pale but intact. Another held a small snake, its coils frozen in an eternal twist. But it was the larger jars at the back that made him stop breathing for a moment, something about the size, the shape. He didn't belong in a school lab. He glanced around, uneasy, as if someone might be watching from the corners where the light didn't reach. A thin layer of dust coated the shelves and counters, but the jars, they were spotless, clean, too clean. Daniel's hand trembled as he reached toward the glass, tracing the smooth surface with his fingertips. The liquid inside shifted ever so slightly, and for just a second, he thought he saw the faintest movement. Not the kind made by settling fluid, but the kind made by something alive. A sudden creak from behind made Daniel spin, his heart thudding hard enough to drown out the rain outside, but the hallway was empty. Only the echo of his own movement lingered, fading into silence. He let out a slow breath, telling himself it was just the old building settling, though the prickling at the back of his neck refused to fade. He moved deeper into the room, past the first row of shelves. The jars seemed to multiply in the dim light, their contents becoming stranger: fish with translucent skin, insects the size of a fist, and a bird with two sets of wings folded neatly against its sides. On the far counter, a notebook lay open, its pages curling at the edges. Daniel stepped closer and saw the ink was dark, fresh-looking, as if the writer had left just moments ago. The words were neat, deliberate, cataloging dates, measurements, and notes about viability. One entry stopped him cold. Subject 7 responded to light stimulus, movement sustained for 3 seconds. He looked up slowly, eyes drifting toward the largest jar in the room. The liquid inside shimmered faintly, and somewhere within that murky amber glow, something shifted. Daniel's breath caught as the shape inside the jar began to take form: broad shoulders, elongated limbs, and a head that seemed just slightly too large. The liquid around it trembled, sending thin ripples across the glass. He took a slow step backward, but the sensation of being watched grew heavier, pressing against him like invisible weight. A drop of water landed on his shoulder. He looked up, expecting to see a leak in the ceiling, but there was nothing: no hole, no crack, only the flicker of the lab's single hanging light. The drop slid down his jacket sleeve, colder than ice. The notebook on the counter shifted slightly, its page lifting as if caught by a breeze, but the air was still. Daniel's eyes darted to the doorway, calculating the steps it would take to get out, when a faint tap echoed from the jar, then another, steady. Measured like a knock, he swallowed hard, torn between the primal urge to flee and the pull of morbid curiosity. The thing inside remained still, but its head was now angled toward him. Through the haze of preservation fluid, Daniel could almost swear he saw the pale outline of a smile. The sound of rain outside had faded, replaced by an almost suffocating silence. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears as he edged toward the door, every instinct screaming at him to leave. But just as his hand brushed the frame, something in the corner of the room caught his eye, a small metal cabinet. Its door hung slightly open, revealing rows of sealed vials filled with the same cloudy liquid as the jars. Curiosity, stubborn and irrational, pulled him back. He crouched, peering inside. Each vial was labeled with a number and a date, some going back more than 50 years, others as recent as 2 months ago. His fingers hovered over the newest one. The handwriting on the label matched the notebook. From behind him came a faint slosh like water being disturbed. He turned slowly and his stomach dropped. The liquid in the largest jar was no longer calm. It churned in slow, deliberate waves. The figure inside was no longer still. Daniel stumbled back, his heel catching on the cracked floor, the notebook sliding to the ground beside him. On its open page, fresh ink bled into the paper as if an unseen hand had just written the words, "Observation continues, subject aware." Daniel's chest tightened as he stared at the fresh words bleeding across the notebook page. His mind scrambled for an explanation. Ink can't just write itself, not without someone there. He stepped back again, his shoulder brushing against a shelf, and the faint rattle of glass filled the air. A sudden, muffled thud came from the largest jar. The movement inside was no longer subtle. The figure's head tilted further, the cloudy liquid swirling around it in lazy spirals, and something, an arm, a hand, pressed against the inside of the glass. Daniel's breath hitched. The outline was long, skeletal, but undeniably human. His legs finally obeyed the command to move. He crossed the room in 3 quick strides, reaching the door, only to find it had swung shut. The metal handle felt ice cold under his palm, refusing to turn. From behind him came a slow, deliberate scrape like nails dragging along the glass. The light above flickered once, twice, then went out completely. In the darkness, Daniel could hear only the sound of his own heartbeat until another sound emerged, a wet, steady drip. And then the faintest whisper, so close it could have been right beside his ear, calling his name. Daniel froze, his breath shallow, his ears straining to catch the sound again. The whisper was faint, but this time it carried more than just his name. It was followed by a slow, deliberate inhale as if something was drawing in tea. He sent of him, his skin crawled. He took a step back from the door, his hands fumbling in the darkness for anything he could use as a weapon. His fingers brushed cold metal and he realized he was gripping one of the long-handled tongs from the counter. It wasn't much, but it was something. A faint glow flickered to life at the far end of the room, not the light overhead, but from inside the largest jar. The murky fluid shimmered with a dull, amber hue, revealing more of the figure's form. Its eyes, pale and clouded, were fixed directly on him. The handle behind him rattled violently as if someone or something was trying to open it from the other side. Daniel's throat tightened. He glanced from the jar to the door, torn between facing whatever was in the room or whatever was waiting just beyond it. Then, without warning, the whisper came again, clearer now, sharper, cutting through the still air. "Turn around." Daniel's grip on the tongs tightened until the metal dug into his palm. Every muscle in his body screamed to look, but the voice's command still echoed in his skull, low and insistent. The glow from the jar pulsed faintly, casting warped shadows across the walls, each one twitching as if alive. A sound broke the silence, a soft splash followed by the slow trickle of liquid spilling onto the floor. The scent of chemicals grew stronger, sharp enough to sting his nose. He dared a glance downward and saw a thin stream seeping across the cracked tiles, curling toward his shoes. Behind him, the handle stopped rattling. The absence of movement was somehow worse, leaving only the shallow sound of breathing that wasn't his own. He backed toward the center of the room, eyes fixed on the door but refusing to meet whatever presence hovered so close. The jar's glow brightened suddenly, revealing the figure inside with startling clarity. Its lips moved, slow and deliberate, though no sound came. Daniel's heart pounded harder because he realized it wasn't speaking to him, it was speaking to something standing right behind him. And then the voice returned, but it was different now, closer, sharper, whispering just 3 words that rooted him to the spot. "It's your turn." Daniel's breath caught in his throat, his body refusing to obey the frantic commands firing through his mind. He could feel it now, warm air brushing the back of his neck, slow and steady, like the measured breathing of someone standing far too close. Every instinct told him to run, but his legs felt rooted, as if the floor itself had claimed him. The jar's glow dimmed, then flared again, casting the figure inside in stark detail. Its eyes shifted, no longer fixed on him but on the space directly over his shoulder. And then slowly, it lifted one hand and pressed its palm against the glass. A second later, Daniel felt the exact same pressure on his back, though nothing was touching him. Somewhere in the darkness, something metallic scraped against the tiles, the sound inching closer, dragging. Daniel's heartbeat thundered, and for the first time he realized the breathing behind him was in perfect sync with his own until it was. The next inhale was longer, deeper, almost hungry. The light above flickered once more, and for a fraction of a second his shadow stretched unnaturally across the wall, joined by another, taller shape. Leaning over him, he shut his eyes, but the voice slipped into his ear again, soft as silk and cold as winter. "Fight, it's already begun." Daniel's chest heaved, the air in the lab growing heavier with every breath, as though the walls themselves were closing in. The glow from the jar pulsed like a slow heartbeat, each flare of light revealing just enough to keep his terror alive. He forced his eyes open, his fingers trembling around the cold tongs, and took a step toward the door, only for the handle to twist on its own. It creaked open an inch, just enough for a thin, chemical-scented mist to curl into the room. Daniel's skin prickled as the mist wrapped around his legs, rising higher, clinging to him like damp cloth. Behind him, the dragging sound grew louder, closer, until it stopped directly at his back. The jar's figure moved suddenly, pressing both hands to the glass, its mouth opened wide now, forming a silent scream. Daniel realized too late that it wasn't trying to scare him, it was warning him. The light cut out completely. In the pitch black, something cold and slick slid across his wrist, curling tightly, pulling, his tongs clattered to the floor. He tried to shout, but the sound died in his throat, swallowed by the suffocating dark. And in that final moment, the last thing Daniel heard was the unmistakable sound of liquid pouring, as though another jar had just been opened. By morning, the rain had washed the streets clean, and the old school stood as silent as ever. The front doors were still chained shut, the windows still blind with dust, no sign of Daniel, not even his car. Only the faint scent of chemicals lingered in the damp air, drifting from somewhere deep inside. Some say the science lab remains exactly as it was, the jars still lined neatly on their shelves. But if you look closely, really closely, you'll notice one is missing. And sometimes, if you stand by the door long enough, you might hear it, a slow, rhythmic tap from the other side, as though something or someone is trying to get out. If you think you'd be brave enough to step inside and see for yourself, let me know in the comments. And if this story left you wondering what else could be hiding behind locked doors, make sure to subscribe, because the next one might be even closer to home than you think.